Good evening, everyone, and welcome this evening to the Hampshire Township Historical Society, our very special program that's so popular. We do this every January, and it's on legacy families. Because you know, the word in this town is, don't talk about anybody because you may be related. Right? That's the word. And actually, the Gustafsons and the Worthwines are related, and we are looking forward to their presentation and the long history, particularly of the Worthwines, with a very special presenter in the second half of the program. Next month, we have a really outstanding program on the Centennial Farms in Hampshire. And these are the farms that have been in one family for at least 100 years. So it's, and we have 5 families that are presenting. I'd like to give them all an hour, but we're going to condense and capture what we can. But next month, I think you'll really enjoy the program. This year is, this is a flyer of all our programs coming up this year. 2026. This is the 150th anniversary of Hampshire, Illinois. This year, we're 150 years old, and we have special programs. We have our traditional sock hop in June, and we're adding on a great celebration of old-fashioned days in June, the first weekend of June. So mark your calendars. Please try to come. Invite your friends and alumni friends, and we look forward to having a good turnout in June for old-fashioned days. Now, are we related or not? No, we're not.
I don't think we are.
No, not you and I. As part of old-fashioned days, we are asking people to look in their attics and their basements and their garage for special Hampshire memorabilia, items that you've purchased over the years that are related to our beautiful village and town. And we have a process of collecting these items, and we will be cataloging and taking care of those treasures. So we encourage you in our History in Your Attic project to do some looking. Go to our website, hampshirehistory.org. hampshirehistory.org. In addition, this material on the table is for your email, and we would love to have your email because we are really amping up our email communication, and we'll be letting you know what's happening in the future. Let me back up just a minute. Art Sabin, or Ray Sabin, gave us this little treasure of Hartman and Son, Hampshire, Illinois, with a cow, of course. So these are the sorts of treasures we're wanting to invite. Can you hear that on the mic? I hope not. Finally, we will begin our presentation with Mike Gustafson and Steve Gustafson to tell us about the history of the Gustafson family in our community, and then we will take a little break and have the Worthwine family. So Mike and Steve, welcome.
Thank you all. Well, this was just, I just put this up here. I really wanted to thank a lot of family members, a lot of people that I heard stories from for many, many years. I moved out here in 1960 and stayed until about 71. and I just come back to visit. Anyway, starting out, this happens to be a great-great-grandfather of mine and these folks. All kind of started here. So as you can read about him, but he was one of the reasons that Sycamore was laid out the way it is. He was a surveyor, and he was very, very proud of having that as the county seat. He married Harriet, Emma Harriet, and that happened to be Zenith Allen from the Corners out here. He settled that was his daughter that Eli married. So he got he had 2 children with Catherine, and then I just put this in case somebody says, oh, well, we remember Barnes. He was married, had a first wife out east, and he went in 1836 to go get her and bring her back here, and ended up she had passed. So the children came with him. So if you have any Barnes that were related, they could be, because some of them are still around, or the name was. They were in DeKalb County in 1850 and 1860 census. And some of his accomplishments as he was a surveyor of town, and this came right out of the history of Sycamore Township. He built the first house in the village. He had the zeal for the welfare of the village, and for years labored to make sure that no one took away the county seat from Sycamore. He also gave a lot to the church. So this is a memorial. His original stones, I'd say they were probably about 3 foot tall. The old ones were about like that. Both him and his wife, they were broken off. They laid them in the concrete behind, and they had a new monument put in. So that was just saying a little bit about what he did. And he actually earned the rank as captain in the War of 1812, is what we found. This was the mansion house, as they called it. It's nothing more than a tavern and a place to sleep. And I believe it had a bit of a general store to it as well. That was built on Route 64 and 23, where the library is currently. And when they built the library, they moved it across the street to where the post office is. And then shortly after that, they moved it again north on Route 23, about 4 blocks. It caught on fire, and it's no longer there. And this is a memorial stone rededication. So pictured there on the left is Ralph Gustafson. That's my dad's youngest brother, and Dan Gustafson, that's the oldest brother. And Dan was a historian and did a lot. I've got where he wrote some articles. He also helped start the Hampshire Society here, from my understanding. So there's a picture here of how we're related to the Howes. We have a Howe in the back here, Mr. Bill Howe. So this was our great-grandparents, or however many levels you want to start stacking them. This picture, from my understanding, came from the Allen family because Lena, twin sister, was Elizabeth and married Harvey Allen. So that's how we got together. And the house had 8 children: Fred, Walter, Elizabeth, Lena, Mary, Minnie, Ricky, and Annie. And Walter, that's your grandfather, right, Bill? So I learned a whole lot more about our family. So now we come to the Gustafsons. We had to get here somehow. So Sven, he came in from Sweden, so he was an outsider. And he's the one that married Emma Barnes, which would have been Eli's daughter. And then they ended up, eventually they owned 40-acre farm near the Sycamore Historical Buildings out there on Route 23. I think it was, they figure about 3/4 of a mile from the buildings, you could see their farm. And he was a farmer, a horse trainer, and did quite a bit just trying to stay alive. So they had 3 children. They had Frederick Ellsworth Gustafson, they had Daniel L. Gustafson, and Eva Gustafson Fields. We never heard much about Eva, and all the pictures and stuff. Kay's had some pictures, and we were able to put some things together. But they were at many locations. Again, he died at the age of 45, so quite young, and possibly due to a Scandinavian autoimmunity disease from genetics. So again, he owned a 40-acre farm, and there was another farm with a Dan Gustafson that's up on Story and Mooseheart. In that general area, he had an 80-acre farm. Believe that was his brother, but I can't find any documentation about that. This Frederick Ellsworth, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time. I'm going to go through these fairly fast on these. There's a whole diary memoir here that's supposed to be over in the library that you can check out. It's about 80 pages, I believe. That's about right.
Yeah, I got it. Brought my copy here tonight.
Okay, so there's a copy if you'd like to look at it. A very, very interesting gentleman. I would love to have met him. The reason I call him Frederick Ellsworth is because we have a Fred Gustafson that was my dad's older brother. And some of you may know Sherry Awe. That was her father. So anyway, one thing I found interesting is in 1871, they were living over in Sycamore and they could see the Chicago fire lighting up the eastern sky. I mean, 1871 was a few years ago. I also found that this thought of prairie wolves circling the house after his dad butchered a hog. I mean, prairie wolves. And Sven got 50 cents an acre for cutting grain with a reaper. Obviously it was horse-drawn, I believe. And I thought this was good too. In 1877, his wife got a new sewing machine. The first year she proudly made a total of $20, making shirts for 20 cents, dresses for 65, and aprons for 10 cents. I mean, think about how your money goes. Now you know how they say every penny counts. Sven was cutting stacking wood for 85 cents a cord. Now that's not a face cord. That is a full cord. That's 3? Okay, thank you. I never did that much. So in 1880, Fred went to work for $6 a month, and that was the same year his father passed. So I'm not quite sure what happened there, but more than likely they needed some more income. His brother, or their son Dan and Eva, they came over to Ellen's Corner because that would have been the relative. So they stayed over there, and it took him all day to come from the place where he was living in Sycamore to go to Ellen's Corner. Now, I don't know if that was walking, by horse, I don't know. But these are all things out of his memoirs here. They bought a 160-acre farm and split it up between his brother, Dan, and himself. And then they, this is where they married, or Fred married Emma, and they paid $7 a month for a 3-room apartment in Elgin. Just think about that. He had three children, and his first wife passes, and he ended up marrying this Rose McClellan in 1926. Just to see how things were, that's all they could do is try to figure out how to make a living. So they took a job graveling a road for Rutland Township. They ran out of money, so he took some paper script and traded that for 4 cows. He didn't have a barn to milk them in, so he had his brother Dan milk them on the farm. He built houses, and that's kind of what started his career. For any of you in this construction business, he bought a carload of lumber at $10 per 1,000 board feet. Well, when you make 10 cents for making an apron, that's relative. So this brings us to Hampshire. He actually traded some labor for an old horse-driven well machine that apparently would put the casings in. And that picture, I believe, is his son Guy, would have been about 5 years old. And of course, everything was done by horses. He sold his portion of the farm and started a well drilling business and windmills. He bought a gas-driven one, and Dan and he worked together, and business was doing so good that he was buying windmills by the carload. So he did some exchanging. He's quite a barterer, apparently. Like I say, I would have loved to meet him. And I think some of you that may know my dad, I think I kind of figured some of the relativeness there. He went out to New York and built a big tower out there by where the current UN building is. And that was big money, $2.50 a day and all expenses. He took his whole family out there. And they lived in a little apartment while he went to work, and they got to tour. But this is what's kind of interesting. In 1904, he bought a corner lot and a house in the same block that he lived in the business district of Hampshire. He moved the house to a lot that he swapped for a well job and rented it out for $6 a month. And then he erected a 25 by 70 brick building with 2 blacksmith forges for horseshoeing and general repairs. He built upstairs was a 3-room apartment and a large carpenter shop to make the wood water tanks. And I don't know for sure where this is at. And we have a gentleman, Horace Ruth. Would this happen to be the bar?
The upstairs?
Well, the building, a 25 by 70?
Could very well be. I don't know when it was built. 1904, you say?
Yeah, that's when he bought it. He built it, I think, maybe 04, 05.
My dad bought it in 80 for so 58, 55. My dad bought it in 55. But there's no apartments upstairs. Eli Click had an apartment up there, but the rest of it was storage.
Well, and Kay says she remembers that there may have been a blacksmith shop on the north side of the
Across the road.
Downstairs.
It would have been downstairs or where the bar is?
Yeah, blacksmith. Matter of
Okay.
fact, I can show you where the pit is if you want to dig up horseshoes.
Okay. Problem solved. We feel that's probably the building. I mean, he built
Remember the other side.
the assembly.
Beautiful building, just as square as you can get.
Yeah,
But I think did the brick come from the Hampshire brick?
have no idea. There was nothing in there about what he built it out of or anything, so. Well, I'm glad you helped us maybe solve that. So
Maybe.
we'll go with it's the cave. And anyway, he had some health issues and he ends up getting an operation. I thought that was interesting. The doctor operated on a sore on his lip, charged him $100 for the operation after he tried multiple things for over a year trying to get rid of it. And the hospital charged him a whole $1 for an overnight stay. So then he sells out, he moves to Santa Cruz, California. And the lot that he had an ice cream store, it gets sold, so he sells his inventory and moves on. He starts carpentry work out there. And he built a lot of stuff. In 1915, he actually did a land claim near Victorville, California. I know Victorville. You remember Victorville? We broke down in a car we had coming back from California in Victorville. Very interesting. That was about 1983. Hot summer it was. Anyway, at 68 years old in 1934, he built 3 summer homes in the mountains. And he names them off, but his wife and a widow friend that was also their tenant out there, he used to build a lot of garages with an apartment upstairs or something to get a little extra income. they went along with him for the summer and they camped in tents all summer while he worked, and sometimes he would get some local help, and they went sightseeing. Now you got to remember, back then in the 30s, there really weren't any roads into the mountains, so it must have been quite interesting. Fred became a builder. It was a very poor picture, and I apologize for this. Janie Tetman had this picture up here when she did her presentation, and then the picture on the left is how the barn looked at Ellen's corner, and it's hard to see in this picture, but it was a double alley, so the cows came in and they both went to the left and the right. It was kind of a unique design, and Fred actually drew it up. He didn't build it, but he drew it up. He actually built a horse barn for Harvey Allen, and that's how they got started with that. So, of course, the barn's been gone for years, and the Thames farm out there by where the new high school is had one identical to it, I'm told. And this is a picture here of when Sven and Harriet with the children and grandchildren. So that would have been what I refer to as my grandpa Dan. That's how we all know him. And this was Eva Viola, that was the daughter. And then this Esther Fields, she helped him with this memoir book. He did a lot of dictating. I think she did the typing. So the picture shows who these people are, and that on the bottom right, that would be these two's grandpa. That was Ernie.
Ernie, yeah.
So,
Rita and Lena.
yep, and we have a granddaughter here as well. So life gets pretty close. Moving on real quick here to this would be Dan and Lena Howe. She was one of the twins. A little bit about them, but they had two children, Harvey Daniel Gustafson, and I put senior because my dad was named after him, and Ernest Walter, which would be these two grandfather. And so Daniel and Eva were born near Sycamore. They moved to Hampshire in 1880 at 11 years old. And this is more pictures. And this would be Ernie is in the front as a small child, and my grandpa in the back. So my grandpa was born in 1893. So this is an aged picture. And then on the right is them as a little older children. This is like a postcard. So this is this is Lena and Dan sitting on the running board. And my grandpa is riding shotgun up there with a cap on, and this is their grandpa driving.
Ernie. Oh, yeah.
So don't know who the rest of the people are. So if anybody is able to identify them.
Lena?
No, this is Lena, this is Dan.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So, but you or your mother didn't label them correctly
Correctly, I guess.
with all the people. And this just happened to be from their 50th anniversary in 1941, and also my friend Al Conroe back here gave me some notes. They used to list in the newspaper when farmers moved, and he brought up that 1928 they moved to the William Howe farm, which Bill, that was what you said would be Big Timber and Woodmere.
That's on Briar Hill, right across from the Wiesman farm.
Oh yes, okay,
Rail north of 20.
that's right. You did. I'm sorry, you did say that. You did say that. Which you said that the tollway split that property.
Yeah, Tollway split that property. 1928 is when Grandpa died in 27 and Grandma died in 28. So that's how the farm got split. Dan bought it.
Oh, okay. And then in 33, they moved to Mrs. John Allen's farm, or from Mrs. John Allen's to the William Howe farm. So there was some moving around, but in 36, Dan retired from farming, and his last home was at 298 Prairie in Hampshire. And that house is still standing.
We lived there.
Yeah.
And this moves on to my grandfather and grandmother, Harvey and Marie. And this was a photo from their 1928 wedding. And below is the Plummer farm, which Kay had a very nice picture of. It was out on Ranking Road that Harvey's parents lived. And in 1925, Marie got a job as a housekeeper for Dan and Lena. The reason she got she came in October. She was sponsored by an old farmer from Germany. She came from Germany, didn't speak any language. He wanted to get married right away, have babies, and she wanted to learn the language first. So the next thing you know is she broke it off. She worked for Ludwig's in Elgin. She worked at the thread factory in Elgin. I don't know if that was before or after they were married, but they went together on and off for about 3 years, I guess. And finally she said to my grandpa, you got to do something. Either we get married or I'm moving on. I understand from Don Ranking and Bill Allen, both long deceased, that my grandpa was like a little banty chicken running around chasing this German girl. There was a 10-year difference. Grandma was like about 22 and he was 32. So must have been kind of interesting. Anyway, Harvey at 53, they moved to the Wilcox farm. So if any of you know where the Duhais are, the Wilcox farm was on the east side of the road and just down just a little bit from there. The buildings are gone. The tree place bought it in about 73, and there was a Gustafson when George bought the farm in 46. My grandfather went on it in 1960. Harvey decides to retire, and his son Fritz, or as we know him as Fritz, but he's gone by Fred. They switch. Somehow they exchanged everything, and they lived in the country. And Grandma and Grandpa went to town. Grandpa went out there almost every day during the week, more or less. That was his job, to go out and fix things. And this is a picture of my family being the oldest boy, Dan, which he had a twin that died shortly after childbirth back in 1930. Bill said we've tried to find, I actually found a death certificate for David, but Bill, you said there's no record in the cemetery of him being.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I've been told that. And anyway, then Sherry's father and Leanne, that's Fred, and I put Henry in there so we don't get him confused. You start going through records and Fred, and it gets kind of hard. The middle one there is Harvey Daniel Jr., that's my father, and Anna was the young girl that came along after they moved on the farm, and then Ralph, he's the one that moved up to Wisconsin on Slender Acres. And a few of you may recognize this, but this was a picture of the farm from the house looking towards the barn and the milk house. What was really unique is that milk house was all the way up there, and I carried some milk up them stairs. I don't remember if I think there was about 10 or 12 stairs to carry milk up. And that's with a bulk tank. And that is a picture of Wilcox and Gustafson milk can. So I thought that was kind of unique. My cousin Leanne has that. Those of you that have been around Hampshire for a bit may remember Dan did a lot of writing for the history in the papers. My mother was kind enough to save a lot of these. It's hard for you to read that, but that was an article from 1998. And he was a columnist and got a lot of his information from that book from Fred Ellsworth, growing up in the area. So you may want to check it out. I've read it about 4 times and found it very interesting. This was also a picture of the oldest uncle of mine, Dan, and pictured with the president and another fellow from the Sycamore Historical Society. And this would have been the next boy, Fritz, as I know him. He was very active. He roller skated a lot. His family did so at his, I believe it was the 50th wedding anniversary. They all went roller skating. He sailboated. He last windsurfed at 90 years old, and he went paddleboarding at 91. And I think when he went windsurfing, I think that last time he went, he was up at a lake up in Wisconsin. He went by himself. He went by himself. He got in trouble from his daughter, but anyway. So here at age 89, he went snow surfing using his water surfing sail and adapted it to a toboggan. And of course, his younger brother Ralph's farm had some slopes to it, and it was in the springtime, so he had a little bit of them, February, March winds. So yeah, he was quite active, always working on projects. And this was a little synopsis of, he was a factory worker in the 50s, a dairy hog farmer in the 60s, custom grain harvesting in the 70s, backhoe excavating work in the 80s. He then decided he'd settle down, and he bought the old township building up in Schultzburg, Wisconsin, and he started a business, Dolphin Marble, and he was building cultured marble countertops and sink tops. So then he decided to retire, and then the plumber and the electricians came after him and said, "We just need you to work a little, just a couple hours here and there." So he ended up working pretty much full time again. He sold his shop, and this fellow became his friend, and they had this Pete and Paul airplane his friend had, and Fritz was the designated to put it together. And it was really touching. He just passed here about 1.5 years ago, and Bill made arrangements, and they had to fly over the funeral home with that plane. This would be the younger brother, Ralph, and so Kay here is on the far left, just a little younger. That was from, this was 1989, and they did the dairy breakfast. To give you an idea, you can see in that second photo all the cars parked back there. I think my boy was about 11 or so at that time. So he and a couple of his cousins, they were running tractors and stuff with wagons back and forth, bringing people up. I want to say there was, nobody ever got back to me, but I want to say there's at least 600 people came to that. So it was quite a doing. I know we had to go up and help them clean a little bit. And Ralph, actually, he was pretty good at throwing things out too. This happens to be an aerial photo of the buildings. I believe this particular photo was my dad remarried, and I have a brother, and he took this from a drone. Because I remember he got too high with it, and there's an airport, I don't know, a small airport, it's probably about 4 or 5 miles over, and he got a warning he's too high, interfering in airspace. But the farm is 1 mile long and about a city block wide. And the Fever River, which they may have renamed the river now, but it's about 80 feet below. And I can't tell you, I went down there one summer, I brought the boys up. It's a big hill, it was probably 70, 80 feet to go down. And there's these big oak trees in this pasture area next to the river. And there's corn stalks stuck in the top. Because in the spring, the water come through. So, and if you can see all the way in the back on the right, there was they called it the pothole. And it was left over from the old lead mine days. Ralph also had some shafts around there. They were air shafts for the mines. And he had one where he lost, he couldn't find a cow. He found out there was a big hole, the hole got bigger and a cow that went down in there. So he had to learn how to farm with terracing. And he had the Corps of Engineers come out and lay out these terraces, and then he kept the crops alternated so you can see the corn and the hay, so you keep the erosion down. And this happens to be the last picture, more or less, of the family right here in Hampshire at the church when my grandmother passed. So it was just kind of ironic, the union from a young girl from Germany that spoke limited English that pulled a shy 32-year-old Harvey Sr. away from behind his mom's apron and created quite a family, surviving depression, wars, and a firstborn child's death. My grandfather had a cleft palate. He didn't have a roof in his mouth, so he didn't speak real clear. And he was very conscious about it. And my grandmother, it didn't bother her a bit. Didn't bother her a bit. So that's my presentation. Thank you.
Sorry for my looks there. I fell on the ice the other couple days ago. But anyway, Ernie, he was the youngest son of Dan Gustafson. And he wasn't quite so shy. He married Wardrita Doty, which goes back to the Mayflower there. But Wardrita, he was 17, she was 18. And then they lived with their folks for a little while. He worked in a shop. But then, well, they had, I'll go over the kids. They had Virginia after the first year. She was the firstborn. And she's the one who married Roger Worthwine. So I won't go no further there because you'll be hearing more about that in a little bit.
I don't know about that. I didn't go that far.
The second daughter, she was born in 1919, Ernadine. And she married Paul Chapman, which is probably better known as Skip Chapman. And then 2 years later, my dad come along in 21, and he married Ethel Gustafson, right, or Ethel Nichols,
Yes.
right after, on December 7th, 1946, right after you get back from the war. And 10 years later come Lena. And she married Fred Nouse in September of 52. And then Ernadine was Skip, they got married in 1943 when he was home on leave. And they had 2 kids, Dana, a daughter, and Paul Jr., which is known as Little Skip. And they grew up there. And then my dad and mom, I had an older sister, Linda. And then I come along in 1951. And as I got older, I married Linda Collins. We had 2 kids, Lori and her husband. She married Buzz Marwick. And then my son, Richard, he married Maggie. So in like Lena, she had, ended up, when they had kids, it was Heidi was the oldest, then Eric, and another brother, Carl. Heidi married Stan Walker, local here, and they had 3 kids, Amanda, Quinn, and Kendall. And now she's got 5 grandkids. But Ernie got in business at an early age in the 20s. He had a Model T with a truck with a tank on it up there. And that's it, getting ready for the 4th of July parade there in town. And he had to drive that to Sycamore whenever he wanted to fill it up with fuel. That was because he had to buy it from Standard Oil, which back then it was about the only place to get fuel. But then in the early 30s, Saucony Vacuum Oil Company come out. And he got one of the first distributorships that they left. And so he had that, so across the street over there, he was able to, when he got a different truck and this stuff, and he started putting a tank or 2 in where he could just get fuel here in town. Because in a Model T truck, besides driving to Sycamore to get fuel, whenever he delivered it, didn't have a pump, they had a 5-gallon measuring pail. And they just draw 5 gallons, and he'd climb up the ladder and dump it in the tank and come back down, and he slid a washer over. And that's every time he'd dump 5 gallons, they'd slide a washer over. So it's quite a bit of work. So when he got in the 30s, got a truck with a pump and everything on it, and Saucony Vacuum, which is later turned into Mobile Oil Corporation. He had that there, and he had the pumps and all that. And in the 40s, he bought the gas station uptown at the corner of State and Wren. That's had that. Got that from Walter Bowman and I believe it was Herb Warrington. But you flip back to the other the old cash register. It's a 1930s from the National Cash Register. I got that in my basement. It's cast iron. I had to get an appliance mover and a couple of guys to get it in the basement. No plastic in that.
When are you gonna polish it all up? Polish all that brass?
Well, it looks polished good to me. So we got that, and that's old time. And so they had the fuel business going. Then after Lena and Fred got married, Lena went with Fred out to North Carolina. He was in the Army there in 1952. So he was Ernie was taking him out some clothes and stuff to take out to him. And he got killed in a car crash down in central Illinois there. Pickup truck crossed the line there and hit him head on. Killed the other guy too. But that was in November 1952. So that's when my dad got going in business. Lena run the office. She come in and run the office there for a number of years until Heidi was born. And the business, grew and all that, but had a lot of years through that and hauling fuel. I hauled fuel for 51 years right off of Mill Street here. 4 different companies, but it's the same street and the same, I just went from Gustafson Oils to Peterson Fuels, the Auburn Co-op, and then the CHS 100, Fortune 100 company bought us. That's when I went from a name to a number. And I walked there until it got sold again in 2017, and that's when I said I'm done. It's going to work, and that was 1967. So now we'll go to Ernie was involved in the fire department. Had the big fire in 1929 that burned out the west side of town, the business district. So in 1930, Ernie and some of the Petersons and some other people started forming a fire department. And they were getting it all set up. Then in 1931, the village officially took over the fire department. And so they grew from there, and our family stayed in it a lot. My dad he got joined as soon as he got out of high school in 1939. And he was moved up to assistant chief for a while. Then Dan Gustafson, which was his older uncle there, he was in it. He had the rank of captain until he moved out of Hampshire to run a feed mill south of here. Chabonneau, yeah, he was right in there. Then Fred, Lena's husband, he was on the fire department, and he stayed on the department until they moved out of town. Because Fred and them ended up wanting a mobile station in Palatine for a while. Then I know Fred come back and was with Earl Engel in the Ford garage, because that's where I bought my first car, 1968 Torino. 390 and a 4-speed. And we tore up and down the streets around the area. Drag race, whatever. Had a lot of fun there. So I got on the department, and I was on for 40 years. And then I've been a trustee on the department for 18 years. My son Rich was on Hampshire part-time for 20 years. And he's full-time at Bartlett now, where he holds the rank of battalion chief. But this picture here is a picture of Rich, my dad, and myself. Then I have a painting over there that Barb Hinkle done. She has Ernie standing behind the truck with in the gray, like looking over us. So we went, then like I said, my dad graduated Hampshire High in 39. I graduated Hampshire High in 69, and my son Rich graduated in 99. My daughter Lori, she graduated in 97. But it never worked, 7 grandkids, but it didn't work out that one of them's gonna graduate from Hampshire High in 29. 2 of them are out, 2 of them graduate this year, 1 graduates next year, then a couple more down the road there, but nobody's graduating in 29. Then another thing Ernie was into and got the whole family into was the Indy 500.
Oh, gotcha.
Because Ernie liked racing. He had a midget back in the 30s, but it got wrecked up at Milwaukee Coliseum in the 30s and depression and that, so that ended the racing there. But Ernie started going to the Indy 500. We got tickets starting in 1935. When my dad turned 16 in 1937, he started going, and he made every race until he died. I started going in 1962, and we got one picture there. The first picture was my dad, me, and my son Rich. Then we got a picture 25 years later. That's with myself, my son Rich, and 2 of my grandsons. One of Richie's and one of Lori's grandsons. And we're still going. We got 4 generations sitting in the same seats. And we just keep going on and on. Lori, my daughter, her and her husband, the family, they go down for the Brickyard a lot. And my wife and Lori and my son Rich, we started going to the 500 back when they were in school down to the time trials at practice. So I'd pull them out of school for 3 days, and down we'd go, watch 3 days of practice and the first weekend of qualifying.
That was my family vacation.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, but all the guys pretty much went on for the 500. That was pretty wild down there at nights before, you know. You get 50,000 people camping around, you know, it's,
That's my uncle.
yeah. Which was the days before, you know, the internet or anything like that. So what he done down at Indy, stayed at Indy, but not so much anymore. But we go now, and besides that, my grandson Joe now, he turned 12, so he got to go the last 2 years. But racing, then my dad started racing go-karts. And we used to run around town here in some go-karts, but then they had River Valley Raceway. It was on Galligan Road, just north of Gilbert's there.
I remember that.
Yeah, he'd race karts there, and he guessed what he was racing in what they call C Open. Race what you brung. So he had up there with 2 motors on it. At one time he tried 3, but it didn't work out. 2 motors, 3 carburetors in each engine running in alcohol. And things would fly. But they had a national run in that old Meadowdale Raceway. We just watched. We went over to watch because the kind of cars he had are carts. They were going down the road on the track at over 100 miles an hour. And all they had was guardrails. So if you went off the track, about half the cart would go under the guardrail. So they didn't want to try that out. But we raced all around. I dragged race with my car when I was older. Yeah. I had one picture I'd like to put in. It was changing. I don't know where the picture's at. Neil gas station there about midnight. You know, I'm dropping the motor in my Trino. Bill Holmuth and Gary Weisman, they had a car on the hoist putting a new 4-speed in their transmission because they always went out. So, and old Howie Bowl, the night cop, he was just sitting there watching us, you know. But we had a lot of fun. Then in the Army, my dad was in the Army for World War II, and he was in the 12th Armored Division. So he had just a truck there that he always full of them 5-gallon jerry cans. So he chased the tanks all around Europe with tanks, you know, full of fuel for them, because they not many gas stations to stop at when they needed fuel. So he'd run around and they'd fill up things. And he said one time when they were going into battle, they had the tanks in a V form. Then they had 3 fuel trucks and a V inside where the tanks are for when they were going into battle. But he made her through. And right at the end, when he wrote a letter home, as the war got over, they took all the trucks they had and picking up the German POWs and hauling them back to Germany and checking them all out. So he had to haul do that, but that was quite a thing. He started out in the First Army, his division under General Bradley. Then he moved his division to the Third Army where he was with Patton. So they seen a lot of action. So now we got through, and like I said, I got 7 grandkids in that. I know Heidi's got 5 grandkids and all that. So we've been going to racing, and I know Fred and Linda, they had a cabin up in Boulder Junction. They enjoyed a lot up there.
Well, if we could see
Okay,
all those grandkids.
and we're just finishing up.
A final one? Okay.
Yep, that's a final one.
Okay. So, everybody who's related to the Gustafsons, please stand.
Yeah.
Let's see you. Hey, wonderful. We're glad you're here.